Welcome back to Visions for the Future of Higher Ed, everyone. Today I'm joined by a really special guest. This is Stephen Rothberg, the founder and chief visionary officer of College Recruiter. Really excited for this conversation today, Stephen. And I've actually checked out a couple of your podcast episodes as well, in particular, the High Volume Hiring podcast. I checked out episode 90, but I understand you're over 100 now. Am I right?
I co-host two podcasts. One's about job boards called the Inside Job Boards and Recruitment Marketplaces podcast. And we just recorded earlier today, episode 102. And
Wow.
the High Volume Hiring podcast, I think this afternoon, I think we're recording 93.
Okay. That
So
is.
close, but no cigar, Imran.
Oh, I see. Okay. Well, I will try to catch that episode 100. That's a huge accomplishment and some really interesting guests as well. So that's part of what got me excited to have you on the podcast here, Stephen. Um, I'd love to just hear in your own words a little bit about the work you've done at College Recruiter because um, your experience there spans an incredible period of time. And I
Mm,
think there's probably been a ton of changes in the job space, but I think the insights you'd have gained from the conversations you've had are going to be interesting to hear a bit about as well. But maybe we'll start with, your journey through College Recruiter and, starting that company and this program. What made you want to start it, and what has the journey been like leading up to where you are today?
yeah. So the very earliest versions of the company was I was in my final year in university. I grew up in Canada, in Winnipeg.
Oh,
And I started this little micro business on campus where I was publishing a map for the University of Manitoba. It was the official campus map, gave it to the university for free. They gave it to incoming students, staff, faculty for free. And I made my money by selling advertising around the borders.
wow.
Um, I went to law school, to grad school in Minneapolis, where I still live today, and graduated, was working as a lawyer my first year out, and really was sort of like, law's great. I wanted to practice for 5 or 6 years to get the training, but my first love was small business. And I had always sort of intended to be a lawyer for 4, 5, 6 years and then get out and either go into somebody else's small business or started my own. So I ended up doing the latter. So while I was working as a lawyer, I got the business sort of restarted here in Minneapolis part-time. For a few years was publishing campus maps here, and some other stuff that was kind of somewhat similar. And then I wanted to diversify the products, and not add an additional product that would cannibalize sales. So the advertising I was selling for the maps um, were targeted at incoming students, at freshmen. So you naturally want to pick a very different demographic. It could be staff, faculty, or it could be the graduating students, the seniors.
Mhm.
So I went with the seniors. And what do seniors need more than anything
I
else?
see
And
where
that
you're
is
going.
employment. Yeah, exactly. It's like, okay, that to be fair, it was not like a smoke-filled room that you were trying to find your way through. There was like you were maybe in a tunnel, but there was a pretty bright light at the end of that tunnel.
Fair.
But so we created a magazine. This is like 1994, sort of pre-internet, sort of. There was an internet, but it wasn't really commercialized yet. And the magazine was called College Recruiter. It was distributed through career service offices. By 1995, there were 4 different regionalized versions in the U.S. About 250 schools were distributing it to about 100,000 students a quarter. And it was great. They were growing, they were profitable. It was a really good business. And then, as life tends to do, you sometimes have accidents. Some of those accidents are bad, and you have to call your insurance agent. And some of those accidents are good, and this was one of those. I literally walked into a career service office at the University of Minnesota, which was sort of the flagship school. And the career service office director said that there's this thing called the internet, and she didn't know what it was. And she said she had never been on it, but she's hearing from some of her students that they're using it to prepare for their on-campus interviews. Because until then, if you were a student interviewing on campus, you typically, what you do is your interview is at, say, at 9:20 a.m.
Mhm.
At maybe 9:05 a.m., you walk into the career service office, you realize that you have an interview with Arthur Anderson or some other company back in the day, and you don't know what they are. at all. You just put your name on a list hoping to get a job,
Huh.
and you'd go to the file cabinet where they would have annual reports and other publications from employers. You'd pull out the annual report and you'd look, and it's like, oh, they're an accounting and consulting company and they have offices all over the world. Well, I'm ready for my interview. That was the typical
Wow.
prep before the internet. But also what happened is that students would steal those. They'd take them home. So you'd walk in at 9:05 and now you have nothing to try to prepare for. Maybe if you went to the internet, maybe there'd be a website. But in 1996, when the first version of our website went live, we kind of took the magazine and basically put it online. 50 of the Fortune 500 had websites, and only 5 of those had any kind of job posting ads on their own site. So they typically would have a page. Here's what it's like to work at XYZ company, and if you want to apply, here's our postal address and here's our fax number. They didn't even have a way of taking like online applications. There was no way to email a resume to virtually any of these companies. So obviously things have changed. Um, we went from at back in that time, 1996, 1997, where if we had 200 people on our site at any given time, that was massive and it would crash the site. And now we help about 1 million students a month connect with employers. We're global. We have usually 3, 4, 5 million postings on our site at any given time. Um,
Unreal.
our niche is early careers, so 0 to 5 years of experience. For a lot of people that are listeners of yours, they're going to understand it's part-time jobs, internships overseas. You see some apprenticeships that's kind of rare in the U.S.
Mhm.
And then what a lot of people will call entry-level jobs, some of which literally are. They don't require any experience. A lot of entry-level jobs, maybe another topic for another day, actually do require experience. The employers say it's entry-level, 3 to 5 years of experience. It's like, well,
I've seen one or two of those.
one of those things is true, but not both of them.
No, I fully agree. Um, that is an unbelievable journey, Stephen. I mean, to think that there was a time when even the research for the interview was completely different without the internet.
Very analog.
Yeah, extremely analog to have to worry about, will the book be there in the cabinet to do that
Huh.
prep right before the interview. Of course, we live in a completely different time now with a completely different opportunity and way to prepare for these interviews. Um, I have so many questions that I think would be on students' minds to get
Yeah.
your perspective on. But the focus I'm trying to have for this podcast is actually for educational
Hmm.
leaders. And
Hmm.
so for the students watching this who are wondering, well, what kind of tips and tricks would Stephen have to prepare for an interview now? I'm sure there are tons of resources I can link to
Yeah.
for College Recruiter, but I think there's a group of higher education staff and leaders that are trying to figure out how to find more opportunities for their students. And
Yeah.
so hearing about these entry level positions that are placement focused or co-op focused, do you have a perspective on how schools who are trying to grow that opportunity pool for their students can go about doing that? Is it by engaging with, a company like yours, or what kind of insights do you have? Because I know a lot of programs are actually struggling to build those employer relations.
Yeah. No, it's a great question. It varies massively, school to school, different geographic areas. If it's a school that just specializes in, say, like engineering programs versus a big general school like, the University of Minnesota, Ohio State, schools
Mhm.
like that. The more prominent the school, the easier it is for them to attract employers. But one of the things that I've seen for 3 decades is that I feel like there's too much emphasis on career service offices being, what's the best word, paternalistic.
Hmm.
If you've got a, typical student coming into your office is 20, 21, 22 years of age, right? These
Mhm.
are all adults. We allow them to drive. We allow them to vote. We allow them to smoke and do all sorts of things that are maybe bad for themselves. Um,
Sure.
but there seems to be this belief by some, not most, but some in career services, that it's their job to vet employment opportunities and to keep away from students the opportunities that the person in career services thinks is not a good fit for their students.
I have
Quite frankly, it's arrogant.
point.
What is it that gives a career service office director, coordinator, whatever, the confidence that they know better than every single one of their students what jobs those students should be interested in? If you're a career service office director and your school has 2,500 people and you've got a student going through a liberal arts program who wants to drive for Uber, why is that a bad thing? Why would you not facilitate that?
Hmm.
To substitute your judgment about what a good job, what a good career path is for that of your customer, and students are customers. I think that that is arrogant, and I think it leads to far fewer opportunities being available to those students than should be. Now,
Hmm.
different story. I'm a career service office director. Imran, you're a student. You walk into my office and you say, give me some help, right? I'm not going to say to you, oh, well, just go drive for Uber. Because again, I don't know that that's the right fit. I need to listen to you. I need to counsel you. I need to guide you. And maybe Uber is a great fit. And maybe it's Ernst and Young as a consultant or Wall Street banker, right? Different strokes for different folks, and then I can help point you in the right direction.
Mhm.
The reality, I think, is that the vast majority of schools have nowhere near the resources to do that. They don't have the staff time, and even if they did, most students wouldn't take them up on that offer. They should. Every single one should. They should have the resources, and every student should be coming into the career service office planfully, sitting down and whatever. And I can dream about having like a unicorn in my backyard and rainbows and glitter and puppies for everybody, and that's not going to be true either. But I do think that one of the things that we're really seeing happening in higher ed is the augmentation of staff
Mhm.
by technology.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
some of the technology is dehumanizing and therefore bad. And some of the technology actually is really fantastic. If I'm a student at home at 2 in the morning and I have an interview that next day with an employer and I know nothing about them, I can go to ChatGPT and learn a lot about them very quickly. And then I don't have to bug a staff member to tell me what does Ernst and Young do.
Exactly.
If I need to have my resume proofread, like when I was a student, I would ask one of my older sisters, well, what about somebody who doesn't have an older sister?
Right.
What about somebody who doesn't have a career service office that they can go into and get advice? And is it grammatically right? Is I phrasing this the right way? Does it match with the job posting? The chat GPTs and other tools out there are really great assistants. And then when somebody really does have a major problem, Imran, I'm coming to you for help. I had a felony conviction 6 years ago, and I'm having a really hard time finding a job. Can you help guide me towards employers who might be welcoming and have a sort of second chance kind of culture? That's the kind of stuff that I think career services really excels at. And we need to free up their time and give them the resources to do more of that and less about is there a room down the hall where they can book a company to do an interview? And even hosting career fairs. It's kind of hotelish, that
Mhm.
type of work. It's important, but I don't think it leverages their counseling abilities. And
Yeah.
and and I want to see more of that.
Oh, you've touched on so many things that resonate for me, Stephen. I mean, starting with the premise that we don't necessarily need to filter out some of these jobs through our own lens, as a career service professional. I think that's something worth considering for, again, folks watching who are trying to find more opportunities, is to check in with yourself and think, well, are you filtering out opportunities unnecessarily? The next part being that absolutely, it's some of these services would be incredible to provide to every student. There's absolutely no way that that's possible with some of the student
Mhm.
volumes these programs have. But then on the flip side of it, I agree. A lot of students don't take advantage of these services, and that's a big question on its own. What would we need to tell students to show them the value of engaging with these folks, of using those services, and the relationships that they can build there, and where that can take them. But I think you're kind of speaking to it with being able to leverage some of these tools to do part of that work. What I've noticed, having been someone who does bring in technology to career centers, is there is inherent resistance around the integration of new technology, the
Hmm.
dehumanization element you've spoken about. Um, do you have any further thoughts on the role that career service providers can play in the future as these services continue to be augmented? I know you touched on it a little, but I would be curious to hear if you have any further thoughts on that.
Yeah. You know, I I do. And I'm glad that, you and I have like 4, maybe 5 hours here, to fully talk through it. And that's just like step 1 of 12, and I did choose 12 steps deliberately. Um, but, no, in all seriousness, I think we have to, in any job, in any organization, there are always going to be things that you'd love to do and you just don't have the resources to do.
Right.
And we always have to prioritize. And when I've talked with some career service office directors at NACE conferences and on webinars and stuff like that, there's a lot of them, I would say most, um, feel frustrated that they clearly have the desire, they have the intelligence, they have the drive to be helping 2, 3, 4 times as many students as they are, but they don't have the time in the day. And
Sure.
and, there are something like 7,000 college and university campuses in the US, and 50,000 globally. You know, just take the 7,000 in the US. Probably 6,800 of them are massively underfunded,
No doubt.
right? And then the other 200 do not have more resources than they deserve. They just have close to the resources they deserve. I can't think of a single career service office that's getting too much money. Anybody knows one, let me know. And I'll push back happily.
I
The
agree. Same here.
um, the lack of resources is something that's common in any organization. The biggest, most profitable organizations continually have to make choices. Are we going to prioritize this over this? Is this a quick win? Is that a long term? Are we struggling for cash today and we just have to get through the next 3 months? So we really have to be focused on bringing cash in the door today. And then what happens a year from now or 2 years from now, we're not going to deal with. Now, a lot of the schools in the US that are having these big budget cuts, right? I
Yeah,
think a lot of them, it's like, we can't be worried about where we're going to be 10 years from now. We need to be worried about, are we going to be open in the fall,
it's true. It's
right?
that urgent. I
And
agree.
that leads you to making different decisions. It can lead you to making very suboptimal decisions in the long run. 10 years from now, they'll look back and say, how could we have ever decided to do blank? Well, it's because you needed to keep your doors open. So it was the best of the worst options. I would really love to see more career service office people focus not so much on what they didn't do or weren't able to do and feel bad about that and feel that somehow they're failing,
Hmm.
and instead focus on the positive impact that they're making on the students who met them halfway, who came into the office, who came to a career fair, who went to your website and used your, interview tutorial or whatever kind of program you're using. And also though, let go a little bit. Don't be so concerned that if I don't do that job coaching session in person, that therefore I'm more likely to lose my job. can be true. There can be some choices like that, but where is your time best spent? And can you offload some of that stuff? Even if you're really good at it, can you offload some of that to tech, or perhaps outside vendors at a much lower cost to free up your time? Because every career service office that I have ever walked into, and I have walked into hundreds of them, the most precious commodity that they have is staff time. It's not square footage. It's not the chairs in their office. It's not the fancy, computers or tech or their video hookup with HireVue or whatever it might be. It's the staff time. So whatever assets you have or wish you had, leverage what you've got, and don't beat yourself up about not being all things to all people.
I think that'll put a lot of people at ease. I think that's a great way to put it, is to not try and be everything for everyone and to focus on the strengths of each individual counselor. Because I've heard that,
Mm,
as well, that there are some who are fantastic at resume review and not everyone has that
yeah.
strength. And there are some who are fantastic at building employer relations. And so focusing on where the greatest need is and enhancing the skills in that area, I think does provide a lot of hope for the continued need for this role, there to be a human involved in it, and um, to be excited about the role that technology can play as part, of this resource. And it's kind of like you said, I wish we had 4 or 5 hours, Steve. I have tons of questions for you, and I hope you'll join me for a second podcast episode in the future. And I'll try to keep it to just 2 more questions
Sure.
for the time I have left here. Um, and I'll ask them at the same time so I can try to weave them in together. One is, based on the work you've done, is there a success story that comes to mind that we can share about a school, a student, where things went right, that we can kind of look to and go, oh, that's something to aspire to, or something that we can feel motivated by? And the second question is, again, I'm just extremely impressed with the growth of College Recruiter over the time period.
Mm,
Having started this in 1991 and seeing such a dramatic change in the landscape of the workforce, but also in the technology that's been integrated into preparing students for these different roles and providing opportunities. My second question would be, what's on the horizon? What are you thinking about next
mm.
for College Recruiter? So those two things. Is there a story that stands
Yeah.
out as a success, and kind of what's next for College Recruiter?
Yeah, so a story that stands out to me that I personally had very little to do with, but I just wish I saw it more. I know it happens a lot. I'm just not personally involved in with it as much because it 20 years later it still charges my batteries. So I had become friends, sort of really good acquaintances. I sort of like never went for beers with this guy or anything like that, but we saw each other at conferences and traded emails now and then. And I think he was the assistant or associate director of career services at Emory University.
Okay.
And I've lost touch with him probably 10 years ago. I have no idea if he's retired now or where he's at. Um, but just one of these just real solid guys. Just love to be around them and soak up the wisdom from these guys. So I get a call out of the blue, and he's like, "Hey, Stephen, I've got a student here." And for those who don't know, Emory's in Atlanta, Georgia. And I've got a student here who grew up in Minneapolis. He's looking to move back to Minneapolis. You're the only person I know in Minneapolis. Would you mind if I gave him your number and he can call you because he's looking for an internship and he doesn't really know what he wants to do? And we in Atlanta don't really have a lot of Minneapolis employers coming down here. So I was like, cool, have him give me a call. Well, guy calls me like 15 minutes later.
Oh,
He's probably like 21 years old. Well, first of all, that's impressive.
I
Like
agree.
right away, it's like, okay, like you want this.
Yeah,
That's a really good sign. Good sign that my time is going to be well spent, right? And that he's
great.
going to like do something with it. Um, and so I talk with him. Well, it turns out some of his family members, I literally was volunteering with them. And it was a kind of a small world. Didn't really make any difference, but it was like, wow, okay,
Yeah.
small world. I talk with him, and I think he was a business undergrad major, finance, marketing, didn't really know what he wanted to do, like about 98% of people in that age,
So
right?
true.
And so he felt like he had good skills where he could get like a financial kind of an internship and sort of see if he liked it. I knew somebody at Northwestern Mutual Financial Services and knew that they had a really great internship program. And so I just kind of connected those two people and then stood back. Find out from the student, I don't know, maybe 2 weeks later, whatever, got the job. Awesome. This guy for a decade, multiple times a year, would shoot me emails, send me messages via Facebook. This is how this is going. This is how this is going. I got married. Here are wedding photos. I have kids. Here are my kids, whatever. He went from that Northwestern Mutual internship and found out that financial services was the last thing in the world he wanted to do. He loved the company. He loved the people. He loved the products, and not for him. Cool, right? He
Yeah.
gets out of that, gets a job at CNN in Atlanta as an internship, which he then converted into a full-time job at ESPN after graduation and became a producer on one of their big sports shows. Okay.
Wow.
I had almost nothing to do with his success. I just happened to be along for the ride.
Yeah.
Now, this is somebody that was confident enough that he knew what he didn't know, went and sought help from his career service office. They connected him with somebody who could help me. I did help. He got that internship. He learned a lot about himself and then pivoted and went after something he wanted and got himself a great life. Like, how energizing is that? Um, your second question about like what's on the horizon. One of the things that we're working hard on, and a lot of other sourcing tools, job boards, other things like that, is the impact of AI. There's good and there's bad. One of the things that employers are really struggling with right now is far too many applications
Hmm.
is the conventional wisdom to their job postings. Um, some of that is self-inflicted. They've made it too easy to apply. One click apply, click, 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 click. You just applied to 10 jobs.
Mm.
No employer has to do that. They're choosing to do that, and then they're complaining about the results they're getting. Own it, change it. Okay, you made a mistake. Cool. Fix the mistake. That's one piece of it. There's this perception out there that the vast majority of applications look very much the same. Therefore, they must be from AI bots. Nope, they're not. You, as the employers, your job postings have always all looked the same because they basically are. You're all going to Indeed, copying a postings, changing the name, changing the salary, changing the location, and running the same posting. Candidates are now, for the first time, doing the same thing because they're using Gemini, ChatGPT. So, welcome to their world. And I think what's actually happening is that if 50 candidates used to apply and 40 of their applications were crap, and so you could easily get rid of them, probably 30 of those 40 were actually well qualified and just had poorly written resumes.
Agreed.
Now, you still have 50 people applying, but 40 of them look good because they are good. The candidates are well qualified. It just used to look like they were only 10. I wish I had an answer. I would love if a career service office person or somebody else had an answer for how employers can better differentiate candidates when they're all actually about the same, that aren't significant differences. That first of all, that person's about to be very wealthy if they can take that know-how to market. But please reach out to me.
Um, Again, Steve, I think I've said this maybe 3 or 4 times. I wish we had longer to speak, and I truly do hope you'll come back.
Done.
Um, because that's such an interesting point. I think that should feel very encouraging to the job seekers watching this. If you're not getting the job, it really doesn't always come down to you were super unqualified.
Right.
Um,
Thank
I've
you.
met so many who are in that position, so many who are extremely qualified, who've done, for instance, a legal internship, didn't articulate it well on the resume, and didn't get the interview or the job, but is a great candidate.
Hmm.
So I think that's a great point. And I just will close with this. I love that you started your journey in the legal field and found out it wasn't for you, and that your
Hmm.
story of hope is about someone who kind of went into financial services and found out it wasn't for them. I think that's another great point to make about the career journey in general, is that it is a winding road and that it can start in one place and end somewhere totally different. And I think that's exciting. So thank you so much for the time today, Stephen. I will let you go and send you a message within 15 minutes, like your other candidate, about getting you back on for a second episode. So thank you so much for the time today.
Cheers, Imran.